cap's about to stay the same generally for the next 3 years. No matter what happens, they're either going to smooth it. It's either just going to stick there because the season gets canceled.
Mhm.
I mean, the cap's just not moving all that much for the foreseeable future. China, pandemic, lost regular season games this
Yeah.
year, everything combined together. So now a decade later, we've had the cap spike that brought Durant to Golden State. Cap flexibility gave the Heat the chance to put what they did together there. And then teams are always going to have a tough time rejecting trade demands like Paul George's, Russell Westbrook's,
Yeah.
Anthony Davis. So guys are going to be able to move. But given the cap circumstances for years to come now, like, are we kind of set for a little bit with what we're looking at in terms of stars and where they are and, where they're going to be able to go now? Like, I was talking to Nick Gelso about this. Like, he thinks this is going to be a chance for teams to kind of reclaim that control over their rosters, over their players. Players are always
I
going to have
agree with
enormous
that.
amount of leverage at the highest level, but the cap situation is definitely limiting what teams can throw around because guys are signed on big deals right now. They're going to be tougher to move.
You know what? Like, I really do agree with that sentiment. I think that some of the player empowerment talk has been overblown. Like, that's why I tried to kind of mention the shorter contracts and the role that the owners played. But the other thing, as you mentioned, is the cap spike. And I think with that kind of being out of the mix with things staying flat. And I mean, I don't get into the sources game. Like, that's just not my lane. But at least from what I've heard, the cap isn't going to shrink. It's going to be stagnant next year.
Yeah.
That's what they're anticipating. But what I think a lot of this is going to be dictated by what Giannis does. Like, I think if Giannis says, "Hey, I'm going to stay in Milwaukee. I'm going to build around them," I think that's going to change the culture of the NBA a little bit. Like, I really think that he's the tone setter in the same way that LeBron was the tone setter in that offseason. And you know what? I do think that as much as I think players having agency is great, I do think that a little bit of stability is good for the league. I think it's good for the fans because when there's a constant turnover, it becomes harder and harder to be invested. And I think to some degree, it has never really been true. Like, I think players are always kind of playing for their own careers. They're trying to better life for both themselves and their families. But being able to buy into the noble lie that, hey, these guys are putting it on for our city, and that connection point for fan bases, I think that really does matter as much as people try to minimize that. So some stability, and for the solution for a team not getting over the hump to be, we have to go get a star. We have to either trade a star because you're never getting over the hump, so you got to get rid of the guy, or we need to go get a star. For the solution to once again change back to, hey, we need so and so to get better at this, that, and the other thing. We need growth from here. We need a tweak here with a new role player or two. Kind of going back to the way NBA conversations were just a few years ago, I think that would be a very positive change. So I really do believe that Giannis is going to be the tone setter when it comes to that.
It's so interesting too because we look back at the Heat, we look back at the Warriors, two of the most captivating stories of the decade, brought interest to an all-time high in 2013 and 2016. So there was some positive to come out of that. Like, it's the whole parity conversation. So interesting because we thought this year was going to be the most parity ever, and there's still 8 teams that it's just like, get out of here. And then there's 2 extra teams on top of that that are going to Orlando. There's always
Well,
going to be a
I
really
mean,
crappy bottom end.
that is still parity compared to only one team having a chance if they were healthy. Like,
We
Toronto
thought
was
that
a
in those years, though, and then they didn't. 2011, 2016 in particular,
well, no,
too, and then
those
2018.
years had parity. Those years definitely did have parity. Like, I'm talking about the KD Warriors. Like, I do think that the KD Warriors changed the conversation because um, it was just so obvious that a 73 win team added arguably a new best player without getting rid of any of their other core guys. So the conversation became about everything but basketball, and I think it was unavoidable. Like, I don't necessarily blame the jump for going that direction and shows like that, because there just wasn't basketball conversations to be had, because it was basically, hey, if these guys are all healthy, there is no chance for anybody else to win a title. Where before, you're always going to have favorites. It's always going to be a top-heavy league. But having 3, 4, 5 teams in the mix that at least have a puncher's chance, that's a positive change for the sport.